So I got my 2003 Ford Focus here that I drive every day to work, about 20 miles each way. And I put a new Rock Auto Chinese brand alternator on it last November, and about 3 months later it started lighting the alternator light up, and I did a voltage check on it, and yeah, it wasn't putting voltage out. So I don't have a voltmeter in the car, just the idiot light. But anyway, make a long story short here, then it magically came back to life until like last week, and then it started doing the same thing. And the way I can get it to shut off is by say you're driving along, 50 miles an hour on the highway, push the clutch in, turn the key off, turn the key back on, and start it with letting the clutch out slow, and then the light would stay off. Sometimes not for very long, sometimes the rest of the drive to work. But anyway, a while back, my friend Dave, who's like a 50-year backyard mechanic, he told me spray the alternator down with WD-40. He said he laid odds that the brushes were sticking in it. So that's what I did. On the back side here, hard to see, but the side away from the pulley, I soaked her down good with about a 5-second spray of WD-40 this past week, and sure enough, the light has come on a lot less. But I'm actually tearing the alternator off it today to see why it's become addicted to WD-40. If I don't spray it down, the light comes on soon after I leave the driveway. If I do spray it down, some days I make it all the way to work without it coming on, and then I spray it at work and light usually doesn't come on. So he thinks it's sticking brushes or something in the alternator, but I'm going to tear it down and find out what's going on with this schizophrenic alternator here. But yeah, he swears by WD-40. Now, don't use anything else. Don't start spraying your, with lacquer thinner or something. You'll melt your alternator. But WD-40, it was built as a water dispersant. You use it on spark plug wires, etc. I call it Wasp Destroyer 40 because it's real good at killing wasps also. But yeah, it does indeed work if you have some kind of a weird alternator problem. But like I say, this thing's become it's like a crack addict on WD-40. If it doesn't get it, now it doesn't work right. So time to tear it off and see what's going on. I hesitate to do it because, it's an hour's work, what have you. But anyway, I'll continue the video there when I peel the thing off of it. Well, there, I got the creature off the car. Spins over good, no noises. I did notice though that my connector wire here, and by the way, this thing comes off by pressing this down. I had a little bit of fun getting it off. But the wires, they kind of got fuzzled up with a brake line, so they were snugger than I would think they would like to be. But I looked all the way down them and everything, and I didn't see any cracks, so I think the feed wires to it are okay. Time to dissect the alternator now. Yeah, it's a nice day outside. I figured why head down to my workbench in the dark basement to do this. Out here, listen to the robins. Now, before you get started on this, you want to run you a line like this. You can do 2 of them if you want. Just get a marker or something. You can scratch it in, but you need a line so that when you put it back together, you get it the same way. You know what I'm saying? The orientation, because some of these things can go a whole bunch of different ways. Although, yeah, this one's going to be kind of obvious. You got the 2 bolts, but that if you remove this, it's not so obvious. So I just always put a line on stuff. I learned that 35 years ago, that it was a whole lot easier to put a line on something than it was to try to figure out which of the 15 different ways it could go together later. So anyway, I'll just peel the 3 bolts out of there and proceed to take her apart here and see what we got. Well, there, after a little bit of prying with 2 screwdrivers on opposite sides, I got the end case off there. Bearing's fine, it's like new. See a little bit of dirt here on some of there's the brush holder here, but a little bit of WD-40 in there, who knows. Nothing too out of the ordinary though. So the 3 regulator and brush screws here come out with a Torx T20. That one's got a extra washer under it there. Slip rings don't look too bad there. There's the brushes, they popped out. Lots of spring pressure on them there. See the little hole. So I pushed like a 16th inch or a pop rivet shaft through to hold them in place to reassemble it. WD worked its way down there. Got a little competition with some young girls in a pool party next door there. That's what you hear. So I'll clean her all up here and see what I can do. Well, I decided to try something different, and I sanded the slip rings down with 1200 grit sandpaper, about 3/8 inch wide strips. Looped it around it, then went back and forth, rotated the shaft and back and forth. They're looking a lot more natural copper colored now. Then I wiped it off with paper towel, and then I sprayed brake clean on paper towel and did 2 circles around them again, spinning the shaft that time. So we'll see if the 1200 grit sandpaper there sand job helped out. I'm going to sand the end of the brushes too, just to see, because I mean there's got to be some reason this thing's not working right. So to reinstall the brushes, I've just slipped one of these tiny screwdrivers in the hole there and pushed the brush down till it went. You just got to be delicate with stuff. Then you just simply slide it back on. Bolt her up, put her back together. Here's hoping it works right. Okay, so I got the voltage regulator installed again there, and took my tool out. Both brushes went twang, so I can see them against the slip rings in there. Time to put the cover back on, put it back on the car. Well, not sure if it was the best plan, but I'm going to try to replace the idle air valve on it here. Since I got the alternator off, you can actually reach down the tunnel and get to it. I got the bolts out by using a 8mm on a short 8 on a ratchet there, and they're 2 different size bolts. The top bolt is the length is about the same, but as you can see, it's not the same thread. So this one, it came out tight, the top one. So I'm going to be wire brushing and maybe run a dye down the threads, because they're an absolute joy to put back in. I spent like an hour fighting it. My wife's car ended up with knuckle prints in the driver's side fender partway through the job. Like, it's just a frustration creator. So I'm hoping this one's going to go smoother. The reason I'm doing this is because about half a dozen times now when I come up to a stop sign, the car stalls. My wife's car was different. Driving on the interstate, pulled off, hit a stop sign, dead. It just died like a light bulb, whereas this one's, the one on mine's just intermittent. But so I could live with it, but I figured once I got the alternator out, I might as well fight with it. So we'll see how that goes. Well, one thing I discovered was that the main wire from the alternator there to the battery, the end of it, well, let me put it this way, I pulled it off by hand. So that might have been a big part of the problem too. I guess if things just magically worked fine, it could have been that, as well as a combination with the alternator. I was successful in replacing the idle air valve, although what I would highly recommend is gluing the gasket to it first before you attempt putting it on the motor. That would have saved me a lot of grief. That's what I ended up doing in the end, but okay, we'll get this alternator on here. Well, it's all back together, and I started it up, and the alternator light stayed off, so here's hoping it does the same thing on the drive to work tomorrow. So hopefully it's another successful repair job.